muted, so we won't have much background noise. Like I said, I'm in Vian downtown. We got 18-wheelers driving through with no stoplights, so it might be a little loud on my end. But man, I want to welcome all you coaches. We appreciate you joining us. And if you're new, I want to talk about the purpose of why we're doing these timeout calls. And we wrote as Oklahoma FCA that this series is designed to help navigate this unprecedented time in sports and life. During our conversations with you, the coach, and our FCA staff, we hope to lead you on a journey of transformation with vision and accountability to your team and your families. Our prayer is that you will be encouraged and challenged during this timeout. So that's kind of what we're basing this timeout time for. And timeouts are very key in all athletic competition, and they bring many advantages to the team and key moments of every game that we're involved in as a coach. And some of the things that we wrote down, and we're going to kind of build it into segments. Coach Blank and Chris Kaiser and Drew and myself kind of looked at what a timeout actually is, and we kind of wrote these things down, and that's what we're going to talk about. And we're kind of going to have a segment built around each one of these core things. And the first thing is to catch your breath. You guys know, I mean, you're reeling in a game. Sometimes you just got to call timeout to just breathe and catch your breath and slow everything down. And the next thing is that you got to stop the momentum of the opponent. We've all been in situations where we feel helpless and the momentum is really reeling on the other side of the ball or wherever it may be, and we have to stop that momentum. And sometimes you just got to call a timeout because you got to hydrate your kids, and or a kid needs treatment that still needs to be out there, and got to call a timeout and gather at that point. The next thing is that we have to evaluate where we're at in the game and evaluate what we've done to this point when we call a timeout. After that, the kids and even our coaches, we gain encouragement and you gain instruction during a timeout. And the last thing that we're going to be so excited for all of us to do when this timeout is over is that we got to get back in the game and take the field. And that's something that we're going to talk a lot about post our calls. But, as we welcome you, I want to encourage you coaches to really chat, get in that chat box, ask questions, talk about some of the concerns you're dealing with, things that we can talk about in the future that your staff or your families or your communities are dealing with, and we can try to address those the best we know how. The main thing, we want to pray for you. And so if you can put those things in the chat and discuss and ask questions, and we're going to take some of your questions at the end and in a segment to really ask and ask Coach Blankenship about those and what he's doing to address those questions that you have as a coach. The last thing is that we have a Zoom link, and if we can email it to you, and that's best for you just to email it to you, and it goes right into your calendar. We want to do that. So the way you signed up for the timeout on fca.org, okfca.org, if that's okay with you, just let us know that. And we can send it out to you every week because it makes it easier just to send a direct link out, and you don't have to go back and find where this call is, and it just comes to your inbox. And I want you to really share with your other coaches as well about this timeout. So we'll get started. Our first segment is that we got to huddle up. This is the huddle up segment. This is where we gather to stop the momentum, and we're going to breathe and we're going to hydrate our soul. And last week, I kind of teased in what we were going to talk about this week with Coach Blankenship, and we ended up with legacy. That legacy question kind of came out of the blue, and I was just feeling I had to ask Coach, and sometimes it's hard on the spot to ask the question about your legacy. So this week, the question for Coach Blankenship is, why do you coach, Coach Blankenship?
Kenyatta, you and I talked about this a little bit leading into today. And I think one of the things when we have timeouts in our life, when we have those moments in coaching, we've been at it for a while, and all of a sudden you look around, you go, you know what, it just doesn't feel like it used to. Or, man, I'm getting to eat up with all this administrative stuff, or the parent meetings, or the whatever, or now the COVID crisis. I mean, sometimes we get caught looking around and we forget, all right, well, why are we coaching? Well, you and I and Chris had a great question. I think and this gets talked about a lot. You got to have your why. Mm-hmm. Well, I think there's a difference in why do I coach today and why did I get into coaching? And I have to remind myself sometimes about why I got in, and now I understand my why. And I don't want that to be confusing, but I want to tell you, I grew up in a coach's house, and my dad was the coach in Little Spiro, where we grew up, not too far from Vian, Kenyatta, as you know, just a little further south, a little more out in the woods even maybe. And back in those days, my dad was every kind of coach. He was the head football coach, head basketball boys, head girls basketball. He coached track, coached baseball all summer. I mean, he was just coach. And I loved growing up in that family. I loved growing up with my brothers, being able to go out to the field, go, watch practice, go hang out at the gym, shoot baskets when nobody, it just felt special. As I grew, the thing that influenced me most was what I didn't even realize at the time, and that was the folks that came back to visit us. See, we lived on the highway as you go right through the middle of town in Spiro, and our driveway would go out to the highway. Well, if you were family, if you knew us, we didn't use that driveway because you can't. It's hard getting out on the highway. So we would all drive around to the back drive and come in the garage and come in the back door. And that's what people did. But as I was maybe 10, 11, 12, I'm not sure when I became aware of it, but we had a living space, a living area that had a picture window that looked out to the front driveway and saw the highway going by. When somebody would drive up into that driveway, you knew you had a guest. It wasn't somebody you knew. This was not somebody that was part of the family. Somebody was coming to see us that didn't normally. And so I was always anxious to see who was at the door. And over the years, more often than not, the folks that drove up in that driveway were there to see my dad, to see the coach. And golly, Kenyatta, we saw, I specifically can tell you of farmers, surgeons, welders, dentists, auto mechanics. All these guys came back to see Coach. Some of them brought their kids with them because they wanted their kids to meet Coach. I don't think it hit me till I was in college how cool that was to think of the influence that my dad had in the lives of so many. And so I'm telling you, as I got into coaching, one of the first things that drove me was the question, will anybody drive into my driveway?
Wow.
What am I doing, so that you talked about legacy last week. What are we doing to make sure that someone of the kids that we get to coach are going to come into our driveway because what we did mattered?
Wow, that's so powerful, Coach. And the influence of the father, when I look at that, it strikes me different as a dad now. I mean, I grew up when, my mom and dad were divorced and didn't have that influence of the father, didn't come from a coaching background. But now, whenever I hear your story, it really makes me feel that, man, it's so transformational, that influence that we have. And there's moms on here too that are female coaches. The influence of the coach still is greater than anything that we know. And that's so awesome. And now looking at that, obviously we got to go and we got to evaluate, our why. And it's a key part of any timeout is what got us where we are today. And so I've kind of crafted some questions for you, Coach, to kind of help define the why. And obviously it changes because, man, you're fired up. I mean, you said when you're in college that you've seen the influence of your father and being a coach and, having welders and doctors and farmers, everyone. Spiral. I know what Fort Coffee is, so I kind of know what Spiral is about.
There you go.
The influence that your dad had in that community is the same influence that still thrives today. Like you said, in buy-in when you started the team after the war, that influence is still going here. So an evaluation of that, how has knowing that, as a coach, how has that changed or developed your career to now as a coach?
Well, I go back to, and I don't want people to think that we don't ever try to learn football. I
Right.
mean, you gotta be good enough at your sport to get to keep coaching. That's just the platform we're in. And
Yeah.
so we can't just say, well, we're just going to deal with all the other stuff. But man, to not focus on the eternal impact, you talked about situations with fathers. I'm going to go real fast on this, Kenyatta, but I love sharing this and have for the last 2 or 3 years. My dad didn't have a father at home.
Mm-hmm.
There were 4 brothers being raised by a single mom who had never had an education. She didn't work outside the home. They didn't have a chance. They were raised in the country. They wound up leaving her husband, my grandfather, because he was an alcoholic that came home and beat them. And they finally left and escaped and settled in at one of her sister's place, out on the farm. I'm telling you all that because those 4 boys that she raised had no chance by themselves. And yet they all 4 wound up getting their college degrees. They wound up getting their master's degrees. 3 of them became coaches. 1 of them became an incredible music person, teaching and band leader and all that kind of stuff. And I always look back, what made the difference? And my grandma always said she didn't know what to do, so she kept them in church and she kept them in school. And the people that influenced my dad and his brothers were coaches and teachers and business leaders. And they saw the fact that if they might help them. And so I'm going to go and tell you this. When I see my players that have needs, for years, I just tried to help that kid. I just wanted to help that kid. I never thought about the generations that might be influenced if I can invest in that one. I mean, think about what I'm doing today is a direct result of what my dad did and how he was able to raise me. And yet it was because somebody invested in him. So whether we're the first generation or the third generation, it's up to us to make a difference in these kids that we get for eternity. We've got to have a plan for making sure they hear the gospel somewhere, for that they see what it's like to make a difference for their family for generations to come. That goes back to, do they come back in your driveway, man? Will they do that? Well, they will if you focus on investing in them at that kind of level.
Man, that's awesome. Coach, you talked about eternity, and this next question is, what advice can you give us as coaches to sustain the energy and focus on the prize of eternity?
Well, just get old and you'll understand. I'm just telling you, dude, when you take a deep breath, and I was talking to a guy this morning and I said, that was about 15 years ago. And he goes, 15 years is happening faster than it used to. And it really, I mean, as I look at my life, I can't believe that I've been blessed to be able to do this for this length of time. I don't feel 63, but I am 63. And I go back to one of our recruiting talks that we always had with the kids at Tulsa. Denver Johnson always said, football's going to be through with you before you're through with football. Well, the closer I get to that point, the more I want to make sure these days count. And so to just get 6 more wins, I don't know what that's, I don't know how that's going to impact me. But when I think about what do I want my career to have done, I want it to have helped change some people for eternity. You see, there's actually a destination of where we're going to be once we're no longer walking this earth. And I just think we have a platform that young men want to hang around coaches. Young women want to hang around coaches, and they want to be coached. And we get to pour into their lives just like some of those people poured into my dad and his brother's lives back, 80 years ago.
Man, that's awesome. Here's the last question. It's actually a statement that I heard, and I wrote this statement down at our FCA banquet, and I put it in our playbooks. I put it everywhere I can see for our coaches to know. And for me personally, Coach Ted Owens, who's a Hall of Fame coach, said this. He said, "We need to use ball to win kids and not use kids to win ball games." That's the
You
most
go.
powerful statement as a coach that I've heard ever, pretty much, besides you either coaching it or allowing it to happen, one of those things. But Coach
Right.
said that, and I keep thinking about that so much. And then I put it in the realms of the spiritual aspect that you talked about earlier, and the prize of eternity. And we got to share the gospel, but we got to live the gospel first.
Mm-hmm.
And as a coach, whenever you hear that, we need to use ball to win kids and not use kids to win ball games. What does that statement mean to you, Coach?
Well, first of all, I think Coach Owens is legend. Okay.
Yeah.
Don't we all want to be still hitting it like he is, if we get the opportunity to live, and he's still coaching. He may not have a formal team. That dude's still coaching every place he goes, and I love it. He's influencing me. Let me tell you what we have both in the sport I get to coach and all the others that are represented on this call. We're one of the few places where our players want to still listen and be disciplined by somebody that's got something they want. We got to understand that we got the ball, just like Coach said. But what we need to do is to utilize our power that we've been given. Mm-hmm. And that power comes, the old, with great power, great responsibility, and all that good stuff. Well, we need to seize the opportunity and embrace the opportunity, the platform, the power that God's given us with this thing that kids want, and to utilize that in a very systematic plan, just like we plan offense and defense and off season, to have a way that they are being introduced to the gospel. Maybe it's not us, maybe it's somebody else, but we're going to have a plan. I may not be the best linebacker coach, but I can get a linebacker coach to coach them. Well, same thing. If I'm not comfortable with the gospel presentation, just make sure you bring in a great guest speaker that's going to do that sometime. You just have a plan for doing that.
That's awesome. That's really awesome. So this my last segment before I pass it off to Chris is a back in the game segment. This is something for every coach. I want you to write this down and or even just remember it. But what we want to do is we want to challenge you to share your why on social media. Why you coach, and we want you to use the hashtag FCA Timeout so we can share that. We can post it. We can create a feed. And we want to hear from you as the coach, because we need to know what influenced you to become a coach. And I think our state needs to know why you coach. And because sports, everyone loves it, right? But a lot of people that come to your games, they don't know your why. And I think this gives us a platform to share your why. It gets you to think about why you coach or why you coach the way you coach. And it makes us better as coaches. And so why you got started or anything the reason why you coach now, whatever, and share it on your favorite social media. Ram, I know the older coaches probably Facebook, but Coach Blank's a Twitter guy. So, and hashtag FCA Timeout, because we want to share that. And I want to know you. I want to know your why, and I want to read them. I want to share and retweet and all that type of stuff too. But I think it allows our state to know that, man, our purpose is bigger than ourselves. And that's something that as a follower of Christ that, I think everyone needs to know that. So if you can do that today or tomorrow, I'd rather do it today so we can retweet it all day and tomorrow. But hashtag FCA Timeout with that, and just tell us your why. It can be simple, but I think we all need to know, and we all need to share that. So,
Kenyatta,
Chris,
I think it's important for these guys. understand your story matters.
Yes.
You know, we don't need a Sunday school answer of why you coach, you know, and I want to know, I mean, man, there's a reason. I see Tyler on here. There's a reason, Tyler, that you're in coaching, you know, and be talking about that. I think you need to understand your story, guys, matters to people, and that empowers them to tell their story. So good job, Kenyatta. I think that's awesome. I just ask guys to get personal with it.
Yeah, I agree.
And gals.
Guys.
Yes, sir. Great stuff. I'm so encouraged. Coach, you're the memories of those that drive up in your driveway and why you coach and making these days count. That sticks with me. And, you know, all of us involved with FCA, our top priority is that all of us, everybody tuned in, anybody that listens to this after the fact, understands that relationship with Christ. And that's where our story, all of us have a story. Our story begins with that relationship. And FCA has done a great job these last couple of years of being able to share that in really 4 simple truths, and we call it the 4. And many of you guys are familiar with that. But if you heard something today that maybe piques your interest, or you want to know more about that relationship with Christ, you look at these images, these icons on here, and they're self-explanatory, and we love it that way. For an old offensive lineman like me, it's got to keep it simple. You got to keep it easy for me. But you look at that first icon in the heart, and that really describes that, you know, God's love for us is endless and unconditional, and that He created us to walk with Him in the garden every day, and His love for us is infinite and unconditional, like I said, and He just He has invited us to do that. But there's a problem in that, and that next icon is the division symbol, or says that we have a problem, and that's sin. Each of us have a sin nature. In Romans we learn that all of us have fallen short of the glory of God, and that we need a Savior. We need that relationship, and we can't enter that without God's. He comes up with the method or the way that He has chosen for us is the cross, and He sent His Son Jesus to die for us. And that next icon symbolizes that, and that we have a Savior in Jesus Christ, and that He's given us that opportunity. And the final opportunity there is the icon is the question mark. And what are you going to do with Christ? What are you going to do with Him in your life? Are you going to accept Him? Are you going to take that opportunity to invite Him into your life? And so, like I said, FCA has done a really great job with that, with 4 simple truths. And if you haven't made that decision, we'd love for you to do that. And if you want to know more, you can text the code GOFCA to the phone number 46322. And even if you're a coach and you have that relationship, but you want to use this resource and this tool, become familiar with it and get involved and share that with your team. And we have tons of resources and tons of opportunities to utilize this. And so we're excited about that. And we just want to invite everybody that's tuned in to utilize the 4 method to share the gospel. Once again, you can text GoFCA to 46322, and you'll get more information, discipleship material, and we'll send you what we have. And the resources today that FCA provides are the best they ever have been. I've been on staff almost 30 years, and it just is so exciting to see what FCA is doing nationwide to equip coaches and athletes to lead others into this relationship with Christ. I wanted to ask you, Coach, a couple questions, and you've answered a few of them. But when you look back on your how you started and your why, is there anything that you learned from your dad that you still use today? Some example or some illustration or something that you learned way back in your days of starting coaching that you still use today?
Well, I was pretty early in my days at Union, and we were in a preseason scrimmage. Emotions were running high. I had a linebacker that lost his cool. He actually was mad at everybody else, but once people started trying to hold him back, he looked like he was coming, trying to attack me and come after me and the whole thing. I was so embarrassed. I was so mad. It was right at the end of the scrimmage, and I'm stomping off, and I'm PO'd, and I'm done with him. I wasn't going to deal with it anymore. My dad caught me on the way. He said, what are you going to do with that boy? And I'm like, I'm done with him. He goes, well, if you need to prove to all those people in the stands you're in charge, just do that. But otherwise, you ought to think about doing what's best for that boy and this team.
Wow.
And I was like, what? I wasn't what I was expecting. And make a long story short, I don't have time to tell you all of it. Daryl came back in to see me on Monday, and we talked about it. And he said, I want to ask, to forgive me and to give me a chance back on team. I said, how do I know you're never going to do that again? And he said, Coach, I know what I look like. I know how I embarrassed my mom and you and everybody. And he became one of my best kids on the team and all that stuff. But I was going to let my ego prove to everybody that, by gosh, I'm in charge and he's done, instead of really trying to build that relationship. And that came directly from my dad coaching me up.
Wow. That's powerful. I love it. One of the questions on our chat line here is, did you always know that you wanted to coach at the college level? And if not, what was the process that let you know where you would end up?
Well, first of all, I didn't even know if I wanted to coach. I went to college to try to be a doctor. I was in pre-med my first semester, got my grades back, decided that wasn't going to work. That's true, but just tell you like it is. I was getting a degree in biology. I was going to go work for an oil company and be an environmental biologist, had all that, but I had this history of what I'd grown up with my dad. I thought that for some reason I'd had great coaches in college and in high school, and they'd invested in me, and I always thought I might coach, but I just didn't really take it serious. I don't have time to tell the whole story, but I had a buddy I used to coach with that was at a little private Christian school called Eastwood Baptist School. Called me and said, do you ever want to coach? And I said, well, I would, but I didn't want to start at junior high work. He goes, no, I want you to be a head coach. My first ever job was as a head coach at a little bitty Class A, Class B, whatever it was, private school. We were terrible. Won 2 games first year, 3 games next year, if you count the forfeit. And I count the forfeit. I just wanted to coach, and I loved it. I didn't know what it was going to look like. I had friends in college. I never just wanted to get into college, but I'd been at Union 14 years, and I wasn't 50 yet, and I didn't think I wanted to retire at Union.
Right.
That's how simple it was. So what am I going to do? And so I just decided, I really felt like God led me to give up my job at Union and just see what was going to happen. And I wound up and it's a crazy, twisted road, but Todd Graham wound up hiring me a year after I thought I would get hired. And I wound up staying 8 years at the University of Tulsa. Yeah. And loved it and hated it and everything, like all of our jobs. College, I love getting paid college money, but I sure loved the lifestyle of a high school coach.
Mm. I remember some of those times. I remember running into you on Beale Street at the Liberty Bowl when you were out of coaching, and you and I stood together during that time. I said, "What are you doing? I mean, what?" Yeah. And you were following God's lead. You're just like, hey,
that was the plan, guys. Sometimes that whole deal of faith is a whole lot easier looking backwards than it is going forward. Because I thought I was doing the right thing, but I wasn't doing it to get into college. I was doing it because I thought there was something next that God was going to use me for. And, it sounds real spiritual now. It didn't feel real spiritual back then.
Yeah. In this time of quarantine, man, we're all missing it. And what is one thing or one lesson that you can close with that the Lord's been teaching you during this timeout time or just this last few weeks? I've seen you post some things on Twitter, and I know you're missing it, but is there anything specific that God's been teaching you?
Well, just in the last 2 days, this was the thing that he impressed on me. It's April 23rd. It feels like to us we're so freaking behind on everything that's going on, we wouldn't even have started installs yet in football for us.
Right.
And yet it feels like, because we hadn't been with our kids, that, man, we're almost in a state of panic that we're so far behind. What are we going to do? It's April 23rd.
Right.
Come on.
Right.
We got time. We'll figure it out. There's a whole bunch of guys on here. I see faces. You know, we actually coached before we had spring ball. We actually coached when guys would show up about 2 weeks before August, and we'd start running, you know, and getting them in. I bet we can figure it out, you know, and we're all going to be in the same boat.
Yep.
And so, again, what God's I think, been trying to teach me the last week or so is, dude, take a deep breath.
Mm-hmm.
It's really okay.
Mm-hmm.
Don't panic.
Right. Good stuff. Good stuff. Kenyatta, I'm going to turn it back over to you. Coach, thank you again.
Appreciate you guys.
So, coaches, here's your homework. I want you to really take some time and think about your why, and share that on social media. And next week, Coach has a T-shirt on and a hat on that means something. It really means something. And so next week we're going to discuss timeouts that you don't call or God calls for you. And so you can kind of take it at that. But we want to thank you all for coming on today. And remember to go to okfca.org/timeout. We'll have the recorded call there, and you can share it with your friends or have them go there as well. And let me close in prayer and end our time right here. And I appreciate you guys coming on, and enjoy the rest of your day. Father God, I thank you and I praise you for every coach and every family and every community that's represented today, God. God, we thank you for Coach Bill and the legacy that he lives, that you've given him to share with us, God. I thank you for just this time out that we're having, because it's actually rallied all of us to really focus on the true meaning of your gospel, God. God, I pray that if there's a coach out there who's struggling in their relationship, that they would reach out to me, reach out to Coach, or reach out to one of our staff, God. And I just thank you and I praise you. We're not perfect, but you make us holy. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen.
Amen.
Thank you guys for coming. Appreciate you. And we'll see you next Thursday at the same time.
By the way, Kenyatta, that's my driveway.
That's your drive. And he's walking.
That's me in the driveway.
I'll have to figure that out. That's what I like to look at right there.
Yeah.
We'll see you, coaches. Appreciate you.